This is One-on-One.
It's arguably one of the most devastating things a woman can hear. You have breast cancer. What's next? Is it lumpectomy? Mastectomy? And what about reconstruction? There are several options now, so which one is right for you? In this next segment, I'm going to take you inside a new procedure called DIEP Flap that's changing lives and giving hope to breast cancer survivors who were once hopeless. When were you first diagnosed with breast cancer?
I was first diagnosed January 14th of 2013.
What did you go through emotionally when you heard that news?
A lot of shock. You can't believe it's you. Then it goes through all those stages, like stages of grief, disbelief. Eventually you're angry. You get really angry. Feel sorry for yourself. The whole why me. And then all of a sudden this empowerment comes over you and you just want to fight. It's just this whole roller coaster of emotion.
What treatment options were laid out for you and how did you decide?
Basically, my two choices were to have a lumpectomy and radiation to this site. They weren't sure about any chemotherapy until they actually tested lymph nodes. So I could have the lumpectomy and radiation, or I could go the route of a mastectomy, or actually even a double mastectomy.
If you look on this image here, you can see that there's some calcifications. And
you had the gene test, the BRCA1 and the BRCA2, but
yes,
but those came up negative.
Yes.
What made you decide to go forward anyway with a double mastectomy?
It was a very hard decision. Back and forth, many conversations with my husband, family, friends. It was a very difficult decision, but once I finally made that decision, because I kind of just knew that's what I needed to do. The oncologist at an appointment said to me, "Are you the kind of person who's going to lay in bed every night and look for a lump?" And I am. I was going to fixate on it. I know that about me. And once I made that decision, it all felt right. This calm, and it was like a weight off my back.
After a woman has made the very difficult decision to undergo mastectomy, then comes the question of reconstruction. And there are three options: an implant or one of two procedures called tram flap and DIEP flap. Dr. Patel, what is the DIEP flap procedure?
the DIEP Flap procedure is a procedure that we use for breast reconstruction. It employs a technique called microsurgery, and what that essentially is a technique that allows us to transplant tissue from one part of the patient's body to another.
This is with breast reconstruction specifically. You are taking tissue from one part of the body and putting it in the area where the breast would be.
That's correct. And the most common place that we take that from is from the abdomen, and that's the DIEP Flap. But we've also developed techniques where we can take tissue from the inner thigh as well as from the gluteal region.
What does DIEP stand for?
DIEP stands for Deep Inferior Epigastric Perforator Flap, and that's the tissue that we use, again, from the abdomen to reconstruct the breast. It's a composite tissue which includes skin and fat. The advantage of that flap is that we avoid taking the patient's muscle.
Well, when we talk about DIEP Flap, there are other procedures that women have previously only had the option of. Tram flap is one of them. What is tram flap, and make the distinction between tram flap and DIEP flap?
So the tram flap and the DIEP flap both use the patient's skin and fat from the abdomen to reconstruct the breast. The difference is that with the tram flap, we also had to sacrifice the patient's abdominal muscles, namely the rectus abdominis muscle. That's the muscle that gives bodybuilders that six-pack look. With the DIEP flap, we are able to avoid sacrificing that muscle and therefore preserving the patient's core strength and stability.
Why was that muscle important in the tram flap, and how were you able to get away from that in the DIEP flap?
Right, that's a great question. So with the tram flap, because we wanted to take as much blood supply as we possibly could, we ended up having to utilize the muscle as well as the skin and the fat. With microsurgery, now we can isolate that blood supply to the skin and the fat and basically just take the skin, the fat, and the blood supply while preserving the muscles where they belong in the abdominal wall.
So when we talk about microsurgery, how are you attaching that tissue? How are you taking it from one part of the body and reattaching it to another part?
So we use a microscope, we use suture that's actually thinner than the human hair, and what we do is we find blood vessels at the recipient's site. So for breast reconstruction, we use blood vessels that run underneath the chest wall, and then we anastomose or hook up the blood vessels that supply the skin and the fat of the abdomen to the blood vessels in the chest wall, and thereby reestablishing the blood supply to that tissue.
So it's live tissue.
That's correct.
When did you first learn that you had breast cancer?
I was at work, and being a school teacher, it's like Pavlov's dog, the bell rings, and you move and you go. And they had called me saying they had the results, not really thinking about it. I just picked up the phone and called. And the physician was very kind and just told me that I had breast cancer. I said, thank you very much. And I hung up, and then I walked in and taught my next class. I have 30 students staring at me. So I went to work, and then when work was over, I got to go home and fall apart.
Now, when the cancer was diagnosed, did you have it in both breasts?
No, I had the cancer throughout my right breast. The left breast also had calcifications in it, and that's what they called it, my right breast, but not to the degree that it was anything I was ever to be concerned about. But the left breast was just a decision I made to do both at the same time. The procedure I wanted to have, they can only go to the stomach once. So to go to the stomach, to use my own body tissue to fill my right breast, if down the road anything ever happened to my left, I couldn't do that same procedure. So it also was the matter of everything that we went through, all the doctors, all the biopsies, all MRIs, exams, everything. I said, I can't worry about this, that this is going to happen again, and I'm going to have to go through this again. So it was easy to just take care of everything at once and not have that weighing over my head anymore. I don't have to have mammograms anymore. Instead, I'd have to have it on one breast, and I'd be constantly worried every time that there's something wrong. And this way, I now have that relief that I'm okay.
What do you hear as feedback from patients who say, going into it, that they want to feel like they're able to be restored to themselves and feel as natural as possible? What's the feedback that you hear after they undergo the DIEP Flap procedure?
Right. It's essentially that. Patients really are able to relate to that tissue as their own, as opposed to having an implant. An implant works well in some patients, but it's still a foreign material. It's a foreign body that's reconstructing the breast. With the DIEP Flap, the tissue is their own natural tissue, and it's oftentimes essentially as if they hadn't lost their breast to begin with. It really replicates the breast tissue very nicely.
I have an autoimmune disease, and the idea of putting something foreign in my body, like an implant, was concerning to me. I have a lot of allergies, so I was concerned about putting something that wasn't my own in my body. So the thought of using my own fat and tissue appealed to me, and Dr. Patel thought it would provide a natural result for me and that I was a good candidate for it. So that was definitely a positive.
You said that it was really important to you that you feel as close to natural and as close to the way you started as possible. How do you feel now?
I feel great. I feel wonderful. My breasts are very natural. So much so that some people who, when you get an implant, a physician can make it perfect. They can't make these perfect, but my breasts weren't perfect when I went in. They actually are very much like my original breasts. They feel the same. I don't feel like I have a water sac inside me. I just feel very, very natural.
For people who choose or select the DIEP Flap procedure, they're in essence getting a tummy tuck at the same time. Is that a silver lining?
Well, that's a great point, and you'd be surprised how many patients actually use that exact expression when I see them in consultation. They'll often say to me, it's horrible that I have to go through this, but getting a tummy tuck is really the silver lining in all of this. And not only is it, a tummy tuck, but what we're able to do for the patient is to really restore their quality of life. That's really the goal of breast reconstruction. And certainly the additional tummy tuck is not objectionable to most patients.
My concern was getting rid of the cancer. So after everything's done and said and everything's reconstructed, I said to Dr. Patel that it's amazing to me what he could do for me, because he just gave me back my normal. I look like I looked before, but better. It's amazing what he could do.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the New Jersey Education Association, Celgene Corporation, Wells Fargo Foundation, Barnabas Health, Health Republic, Insurance of New Jersey, New Jersey Sharing Network, and by promotional support provided by The Record, North Jersey's trusted source, and NorthJersey.com, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and its monthly magazine, New Jersey Business. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.